I'm very happy to kick off our plenary session. Very exciting topic, commercialization of ATMPs, moving from innovation to market success. My name is Behnam Baghbaderani. By way of introduction, I'm head of sales for Lonza, specialized modalities. I've been in the cell and gene therapy industry for over 22 years, actually on the technical side as a scientist, biomedical engineering, developing cell and gene therapies and moving our customers from clinical to the commercial. And about 2 years ago, I decided to move into the commercial role. I'm very happy and excited to start this exciting panel discussions about one of the key topics as far as cell and gene therapies are concerned. We have highly experienced and very accomplished leaders in cell and gene therapies. They come with different focus and background in terms of the modalities that they work in their respective companies. So before we start and deep dive into the topic and commercialization of cell and gene therapies, I would like us to start by introduction. If you don't mind, my esteemed panelists, if you can introduce yourselves, and if you can highlight your focus, the focus of your company, and a little bit about your views around the commercializations. And then we can deep dive into the topics associated with this exciting panel. Shankar, please go ahead.
Shankar Musunuri, Chairman, CEO, Co-founder, Ocugen. We're a leading ophthalmology gene therapy company focused on major blindness diseases. We have 3 programs going through the clinical trials. 2 of them are in late stage. 1 will be in the late stage next year. We're not targeting small diseases. We go after master genes. We treat the entire disease, not specific genotype or specific mutation, unlike traditional gene therapies and gene editing. So because of that, we can really go after the disease. We're treating something. First program is retinitis pigmentosa. Defects in over 100 genes can cause it. Genes don't work in isolation. They work as a network. What we found out, any defect, you have key functioning genes responsible for key functions from cell development, metabolism to survival. They're all depressed. We found a missing link. That's a master regulator. So that's what we work on. Because of that, once you give the master regulator, you can reset the system, restore the function of those key functioning genes, and also create a healthy environment for genes to survive. This is a very powerful concept because photoreceptors are non-dividing cells. If I can reset them and create a healthy environment, potentially they should survive the rest of your life. So because of that, we have 4 groundbreaking publications in Nature. Now we're replicating the data in human subjects in all 3 programs. The first one, retinitis pigmentosa, has about 300,000 patients between US and EU together. And that's going through phase 3. Next year, we're planning to complete our BLA and MA filings. The second program, Stargardt disease, significant unmet medical need, 100,000 patients in US and EU. We're planning to initiate our registration trial shortly, and that will be ready for filing in 2027. The last one, which is the biggest program, dry age-related macular degeneration. The late stage is called geographic atrophy. That's 2 to 3 million patients in US and EU together, and that will get into phase 3 next year. That will be ready for 2028 BLA and MA submissions. So in the next 3 years, we're planning to file 3 major filings to bring these products to the market so that we can address majority of the blindness diseases today. That's Ocugen.
Hi, Kinnari Patel. I'm the president, head of R&D, and CEO for Rocket Pharmaceuticals. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, and one of the best things I've ever had a chance to do is to work at Rocket. I've been with Rocket for a little over 9 years, and what's really exciting about Rocket Pharmaceutical is we are a company focused on making drugs happen and be developed for patients with high unmet medical need. We have an integrated clinical stage pipeline, which has 2 programs in the late stages under review with either FDA and or EMA. And we're hoping to commercialize them next year. So this topic is very relevant, and I'm happy to share my insights. We have 2 programs that are in phase 2 pivotal studies, and we have other programs that are on the heels of an IND in a phase 1. So that is the publicly disclosed indications we work on. Our philosophy is really simple. We want to integrate the science, the patients, the community, and the KOLs and the health authority every step of the way. So every drug that we work on, we go after monogenic diseases with huge unmet medical need, and we try to learn from one development, add it to the next, and add it to the next. So hopefully we can work together to really make a difference in over 100,000 plus patients' lives with the pipeline that we have.
Thank you.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Poehnelt. I'm the Vice President for Cell Therapy, Lymphoma, and Leukemia at J&J. I'm also included in that is Carvykti, which you heard about a little bit today, and we have a couple of cell therapies. I've been with J&J and Carvykti for about 2.5 years, but I've been 20 years in the industry. I was 18 years with Merck across various different platforms with really a focus in oncology and Keytruda, and I came to J&J about 2.5 years ago specifically to work on Carvykti. I thought it was an amazing opportunity. I'd seen the promise of cell and gene therapy for years in development and how it would be put to work on oncology. At J&J, I won't go across all of our pipeline. We're a quite diverse company, but I can speak a little bit to hematology. So we're really a disease-focused company. We're the leaders in hematology as of last year, which is really exciting. And we have quite a portfolio across multiple myeloma, where Carvykti is as well. Across various platforms, we have a leader in Darzalex, as well as T-cell engager platform, and then Carvykti. So we really are bringing our entire portfolio, including Carvykti, to bear to really look to cure multiple myeloma.
As you can see, we have actually very exciting panel. We have viral vector gene therapies. We have cell therapies that are focused on rare disease, and we have cell therapies that are focused on large indication. And what I'm hoping that with this panel discussion, we can shed lights on some of the challenges that we've seen around commercialization and commercial viability of cell and gene therapies. And obviously, we would like to also talk about the fact that cell and gene therapies are life-saving therapies, and the access to the patient is very important in this industry. So if I have actually prepared a slide. If you look at the number of approved cell and gene therapies, we have over 50 approved cell and gene therapies. Of course, here we are excluding the cord blood therapies and also tissue engineered products.
Cell and gene therapies are the greatest discovery of 21st century. But any new technology, when the pioneers come in, you have the kinks in the system, you have to work it out. And initial gene therapies, they're all focused on ultra-rare disease or diseases. They have some therapies available. And so I think, and also systemic gene therapy is another area where you need 1,000 to 10,000-fold higher dose than we target in ophthalmology. We go directly into the retina, so we don't need a large dose. So the two key factors, population size you're targeting. Number two, the manufacturing costs. And then coming back to affordability and pricing. And do we have the pricing models in US and EU today for pricing gene therapies? Probably not. The system has to work itself out. And when you're targeting diseases, I mean, these are transformative therapies, irrespective of who is making them. And as I mentioned, 50 years down the road, we're going to look back and say, wow, these are the greatest discoveries of 21st century. However, when you're targeting these transformative therapies, targeting 50 patients, 100 patients, because our pharmaceutical system, commercialization is so expensive. I mean, going through payer network in EU, US, everywhere there are a lot of complexities. So is the pricing appropriately priced for the existing therapies? So we can discuss more about it. I think if you're targeting ultra-rare diseases, how do you price them? And can the system absorb it? Probably it may not be significant impact. We got about $500 billion drug costs in US. Similar amount is spent in the EU too. However, you cannot, if you have a large disease burden like we are getting into, it's a very different paradigm. I mean, if you're trying to even treat 50,000 patients, gene therapy started pricing from $900,000. Today, some of the gene therapies are priced at $4 million per patient because they're potential cure for life. I know we don't get a cure in the indication from agencies. They call it treatment, but they are potentially single treatment for life. So what is the right cost? I think we really have to understand how the healthcare systems are currently working, and we cannot put a lot of stress on the budget. We need to work within the system, and how do you, price these drugs, gene therapies, so they're affordable and they get access to the patients who need them. So their current models are one-time payment. Are those models good for every gene therapy? Probably not. And we're already worried at Ocugen because we're targeting hundreds of thousands to millions. If we treat dry age-related macular degeneration just in EU, 50,000 patients a year, if you charge like $2 million a patient, do you think the system can absorb one company? It's not. So I think we need a revolutionary change about our thinking. Just like Rebecca, I spent half my life of 32 years in big pharma. I came from there. I think the current models may not work. And this is, again, we may have to go to subscription model like tech companies do. And that way, within the healthcare budget, we can pay. If we say this is one-time therapy for life, we stand by it and pay over a period of time. So that way, we can work out the models. I think these are the revolutionary changes we need from the payer perspective. That's my thinking.
I love it. Maybe I'll take a different perspective because you covered so many great points. When I think about commercialization, I think the biggest challenge we have is we're new at it, right? The models that we use for commercializing biologics, small molecules, do not apply when you're working on therapies that are potentially one and done curative, right? So the pricing models are different. It's not about having sales force, it's about having MSL, and it's about diagnosing patients, because urgency of the disease we work on are very real. There's not enough time for these patients, and knowing that there are patients waiting by the time a BLA is submitted, and there's a lag of approval to commercial launch, right? You have to think about what is the urgency, how do we make it so every patient gets the same love, care, and attention they did in clinical studies, and get the therapy safely across the different sites, across the different countries when it's commercialized. So I think having that perspective of integrating speed, but also diagnosing patients. So it's not that these diseases are well understood and known. So genetic testing is so critical. So commercially, to be successful, a lot of things you need to do, just like CMC cannot be an afterthought, patient identification cannot be an afterthought. So the minute you have an IND, I would say get genetic testing, identify your patients, your advocates, have them lined up. Think about centers of excellence. So we are at Rocket very uniquely fortunate that we work on monogenic diseases using 2 different technology. We're platform agnostic. For our AAV therapies, we have a different approach to clinical trials and commercialization than we do on ex vivo lenti. So within a company, don't be afraid to use different models that work for different diseases and different unmet medical need. For the ex vivo lenti, we've learned the challenges associated with that is operational, right? What are the centers of excellence? How are the payers going to set up? How do you get the product from the drug manufacturers on time to the patients, right? And then how do you recoup, from a pricing perspective, one and done curative therapies? So what's the value proposition and what are the different pricing models? So I think the beauty of being in forefront of an innovation is you get to create a lot of things, you get to learn a lot, but the nervousness is also that we're all learning together. And I think we have to help each other to see what success looks like the Vex's drug, and what are some of the challenges we face as an industry that we can learn from.
Thank you. Rebecca,
Great, a lot of really great points. I think about commercial success in 3 buckets. There's approval that we heard a lot about today, and the endpoints and the data and evidence required for that. There's access, which sometimes are similar data and evidence, but sometimes you actually need additional evidence on top to ensure access. And the third is adoption. So yes, you can use some of the evidence in the first 2 buckets, but sometimes you need additional evidence for adoption, and that means what evidence do you need to convince physicians and patients that what you're offering is better than what's already out there. And again, when we look to build for commercial success at J&J, we look to address all 3 of those buckets in parallel in our comprehensive clinical development plans as well as our evidence plans. And they need to really work together to have a successful, what I would call, asset strategy. So that's how we think about it. One of the biggest barriers we heard about earlier wasn't so much the approval. I was surprised to see that all of the withdrawals were actually for commercial reasons. So that was interesting. So I'm assuming that was the last 2 buckets, so access as well as adoption. And when it comes to access, we believe in value-based reimbursement or value-based pricing. So we don't price based on cost of goods. I know that's always a hot topic for cell and gene therapy, but to us, it's independent. Yes, we need to get our cost of goods, it's an enabler, but we really base for the value that the medicine's bringing to physicians and patients, and that we prove, not just we try to convince them, but we prove it through our clinical development and our evidence plan that we then bring to payers in order to enable successful access.
Yeah, great points. I guess based on the discussion that we just had, obviously, the disease model, the patient screening, and essentially also having appropriate pricing model are key topics. What about the commercial viability? And I'd like to hear, your points about when you look at commercial viability. Where are the key points that you consider? I mean, is it about the robustness of the manufacturing process? Is it about the affordability of the indication? Also, if you can speak a little bit about the chances to increase the commercial viability. You just mentioned some of these therapies are withdrawing at the late stage. Is there a strategy to address some of the challenges and foresee these challenges early on, to not go this far and essentially address those challenges? Maybe, Rebecca, you can start, and then we can go with Kinnari.
Sure, and I can talk a little bit about at least how we addressed it with Carvykti. So we're now, just to put it in perspective, we got approval for Carvykti in 2022 and launched in the US. We launched in the EU in 2023 and have been scaling manufacturing all along. By the end of 24, we were launched in 5 countries globally, and now 25 year date, we're launched in 10 countries. So we've really accelerated and solved, or at least addressed many of these questions or issues, although we're always looking to improve. So again, I believe that our ability to be launched and continue to globalize was because of the very robust clinical development and evidence plan that we developed along the way in a very strategic fashion. This didn't happen by chance. We believed in Carvykti as a company, and we went full out on clinical development. We got approval in the late line setting first. Last year, we got approval in the earlier line setting already, so that trial was well underway before our late-stage trial ran out, and we're currently running 2 first-line studies. So we're not done with our second-line plus indication, but we're in the midst of running CARTITUDE-5 and CARTITUDE-6 to address first-line patients in multiple myeloma. So we really developed that full plan, and I think that's important on the evidence to build and to use for commercial success, both in access as well as adoption, because of the way we design the trials. The other thing I'll mention is also the commercial model from a pharmaceutical company perspective is quite different than traditional pharma. So I mentioned I was at Merck before. I worked quite some time on Keytruda, what I would call like a make-to-stock product, right? And here with Carvykti, it's a two-way supply chain. The physician and the patient are our supply chain in, or part of our supply chain in, and then of course we have to supply back to the patient, which is obvious, but it's setting up completely different lanes than we had to with a more traditional product. So it really takes quite a commercial footprint and unique capabilities compared to what a traditional pharmaceutical product is used to developing. I feel very fortunate to be commercializing Carvykti within a company that is such a powerhouse in multiple myeloma, because we really can leverage our commercial footprint that we have established already and the relationships, which are really critical in order to enable Carvykti to launch as quickly as it has.
Yeah, thank you. Kinnari, you have rare disease indication, and I'm interested to see what are the common themes, essentially from commercial viability perspective, and what are the differences that you see in your strategy setting when it comes to the commercialization and commercial viability?
Maybe I'll talk about our cardiovascular profile. So our cardiovascular portfolio of 3 drugs that we have, the interesting component is this. Rocket was the first company to ever show that gene therapy could work in cardiac diseases, and we can treat adults with AAV gene therapy. So it's beautiful to see that, and it's great to have a phase 1 data that was published in New England Journal of Medicine end of last year, right? So for me, commercial viability means, how do I get cardiologists around the world to actually diagnose, do genetic testing, right? When there's not a treatment option, you know, I've talked to the best experts and the centers of excellence for cardiology in the US, and they say, well, we don't go for the cardiomyopathy panels, and gene therapy is not a real option, is it? Right, so how do you work with cardiologists, talk about gene therapy, talk about a different way to treat a patient, except not just a heart transplant, right? So education for commercial viability is really important. Genetic testing is really important. Data and education of what this benefit risk looks like and the long-term durability of this is very important. So when I think of commercial viability, those are some of the things that we're constantly that are on top of our minds, because they're on top of our patients' minds. Our patients are saying, we'd love to have access to X, Y, and Z, but I've been diagnosed, but I can't get reimbursement or support to get my family diagnosed, right? What do I do? So when we think about commercial viability, the other thing we did at Rocket Pharmaceuticals is last year we launched a mission genome project. So we're making genetic testing for cardiac diseases free of charge with the genetic counseling available for all the patients in the US, all the people live in the US. So to me, that's a way to chip away at that, because when you have patients, when you have physicians that can diagnose before it gets too late, then you have a market set up. And so working with advocacies is going to be really critical. For AAV, it's a different component because it's a frozen product and vials that get to ships. It's a lot easier. But when we think about logistics, ex vivo valenti, we have to absolutely coordinate, right? We have to coordinate with Lonza. Hey, this is when you're going to get the apheresis product. So commercial viability means not just having the reimbursement, having the patients, the centers of excellence, but ensuring end-to-end that from apheresis on Monday morning till Friday manufacturing, everything goes great, right? And then one of our product is fresh. So infusing this patient over the weekend is something we think about from a commercial viability, which hospitals can support a patient treatment over the weekends. So these are all the logistical challenges. They each have different ones depending on the platform. But I think there's a lot of synergies we can learn from CAR-Ts that can be applied to ex vivo lenti, and leveraging a lot of the experiences from Kymriah and J&J's work, I think helps tremendously.
Thank you. And Shankar, but the same topic, but what are the key considerations from commercial viability perspective for your respective, AMD and also using viral vector gene therapies?
I think one thing definitely on the same lines, in order to get there, you talked about manufacturing. When you go to large disease burden, even though our dosing is a lot less compared to systemic gene therapies, once you get there, you don't want to struggle with supply. So we already have a lot of capacity we built with our ex-US partner, as well as we have our own facilities. We're going to be getting up and running by the time we launch the first product in US. So that's number one. Make sure you have supply assurance. Number two, the pricing. I mean, when you look at the gene therapy landscape, Zolgensma is the only product which actually look at the budget, what analysts predicted in the first 4 years, they beat those estimates. They predicted about $3 billion, they made close to $5 billion. Unfortunately, in our pharmaceutical world, a lot of you probably worked in large pharma, unless you make $1 billion, nobody pays attention. It's very difficult to get resources. And I think, how do you shift that paradigm? I think pricing is really important. I mean, it's not about, I agree with Rebecca, when you're looking from value perspective, it's about quality life years and the pharmacoeconomic models. They have to dictate, irrespective of what the cost of goods is. Depending on what gene therapy, what target you have, cost can change. And some people may have restricted. At least in our case, that's not an issue, but we want to price it reasonably good and not too high, and so that in EU, US, everywhere, they can afford it. That's really important within the healthcare system. So we need to come up with the different models too, as I mentioned, about value-based pricing and also some kind of a subscription models if we can work with the government ahead of time. Because if you're targeting like age-related macular degeneration, it's mostly the patients who are covered under CMS in US. Similar trends will apply in EU. Working on that. So manufacturing, appropriately pricing it, and how you get paid over a period of time rather than just putting a stress on the system. And third most important thing, just as in CAR-Ts, very specialized centers, we do need in our space too, because this is a subretinal surgery. And so we have in US 2,500 retinal surgeons, we have equal number in EU, and only handful are trained in gene therapy surgeries. And now you go take that to the marketplace like AMD you talked about. If I want to do 30,000, 50,000 surgeries a year, how do I do that? Just like CAR-Ts. So we need to really work from end to end. It's not about the product, it's not about storage. Like Kinnari said, it's a frozen product, off the shelf. You can send it to the centers, but creating these centers of excellence across the globe, that will be our challenge. And making sure all the surgeons who are doing our phase 3 clinical trials in US, and they go across the world, make sure they train those surgeons. Because that's really important. It's a one-time therapy for life. And we don't want to make a mistake doing the surgery. Yeah. So those are the three things I want to focus on. Focusing on access and pricing it right, manufacturing, and also centers for excellence, establishing them, make sure the patients get the ultimate best care.
Thank you. Just maybe segue into a hot topic these days, especially with the current, socio-economic, political situation that we have, and that's evolving regulatory landscape. And I'm sure that, that one of the topics that for cell and gene therapies, the regulatory guidelines are quite dynamic, and it's evolving, and there are a lot of learnings. I wanted to start with you, Kinnari. If you can share your views, how the regulatory guidelines could impact the commercialization of your respective cell and gene therapy product?
Yeah. I kind of think of it as an integrated effort. So for us to be commercially successful, we need to work with the payers and show the value proposition of our therapy. To get there, we need to work with regulators to get an approval, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand. What I recommend doing is guidances are, yes, lagging behind. Again, when you're in forefront of innovation, you're discovering, you're learning, you're working together. What I found really valuable is having perspectives of patients, collecting data, not just on the survival and the biomarkers and the biopsy data, but the quality of life data, right? We have patients that couldn't walk from class to class because of their Danon disease. Now they're going trick-or-treating for 2 hours and running around or doing a 5K. This is amazing, right? This is impactful. So that conversation and that patient impact, being brought to the EMA discussions, to the FDA discussions, as Emma said, what is your practically impact of gene therapy and cell and gene therapy? Tell us about it. So bringing that to health authorities, I think, helps a lot. When there are not regulations and guidances, and there are all these diseases we work on are N of 1. Paving the way with experts that are treating physicians and the patients to be integrated with your regulatory meetings, and the same strategy with your payer discussions makes a world of a difference. So to me, it's not just about how do I design an approvable endpoint, but how do I holistically design all endpoints to serve both clienteles, because it's not just about short-term success, but it's also about the long-term success.
Thank you. Rebecca, your perspective?
Just to build on that, I was excited to hear Amir mention earlier, come early and come often. I couldn't agree with that more. Go with your initial plan, adjust based on their feedback, and then go back again if you're not sure. I think it's really a two-way discussion. I don't think as a company you want a surprise, and they don't want surprises. So leverage that invitation, and I think that's a great way. Yes, you look at the framework, but I think really they provide companies the opportunity to get their feedback live and really make it a partnership between the agency and the company. They also have patients at the center as well, so you can work together to make sure that in the end you emerge the first time with the right data to get approval. I would say the same for payers. There is frameworks, know them well, have the experts in there. It's actually a little more formulaic with the payers, to be honest. You know what you have to satisfy with, let's say, for example, the German payers, very laid out as the plan. So satisfy that in the first time you're going, rather than going back, and that will also help enable your success.
Thank you. And Shankar, for viral vector gene therapies, what are the learnings, particularly when it comes to interaction with FDA and the regulatory guidelines?
I mean, so far, I would say very positive.
Yeah.
Just as Kinnari stated, we start any critical meetings going into registration trial with the patient video. And recently, the Stargardt disease is a significant disease burden, 100,000 patients in US and EU. There's nothing for them today. And unfortunately, if you have that at some point of your life, all the smart retinal surgeons can say, you will become legally blind. How are you going to prepare for your life? So in our video, there is a college kid who is in the middle of his, in a couple of years, he's going to graduate. He has aspirations to go to law school. And his left eye is going down in vision. After the treatment of 6 to 9 months, it really improved. Not just stabilizing it, it improved compared to right eye. Now he got that hope back. He wants to go to law school. He said, now I can do it. And that's the kind of inspiration you get. We always show those videos to FDA. They encourage. In fact, the reason why it's important from the patient perspective, you want to work with agencies to develop a very effective, efficient trial. That's really important. Scientific, of course, you work on safety and efficacy, but it has to be efficient, effective. You cannot just take, whatever the models you had in the past and say, this is how we do it. It's not going to work out. Because if you're taking 3 or 4 years to do your registration trial, that's going to impact on patients. By the time you get the product out, many of the patients could become legally blind. So I think with that, agencies were very helpful. In fact, we're able to convert our phase 2 into registration trial, 50 patient, rather than going to phase 2 and phase 3. That's a big win. And we're working with EMA right now because our first program, retinitis pigmentosa, EMA is very supportive. And since we are going for the broad indication, covering about 100 genes which can cause the disease, we have a 150 patient trial. It's the largest gene therapy orphan trial we're doing currently in the US. And EMA liked the design. They looked at the data in phase 1-2. They said, we'll go with it. You don't need any clinical trials in EU. And they gave a green signal. I think the agencies are very collaborative. And the FDA with the ATMPS in EU and also with the RMAT designations, you have access to them at any time. Even during the clinical trial, when you're doing the registration trial, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to them. You don't have to wait for weeks. In days, they'll jump on calls with you. They'll work with you. So our experience with agencies is very positive and collaborative.
Thank you. Excellent comments. I would like to highlight maybe some of the differences that you might see from the learnings that we've had from US and how do we apply to Europe. And probably from regulatory perspective, but essentially from regional harmonization, those angles. Are there learnings that you think the companies, the regulatory and all the CDMOs could use and apply from US to Europe to kind of harmonize? Because we do see that there are differences regionally, and then also the number of approvals are differences. Any thoughts on that? What should be the approach?
I mean, ideally, I know we just had a keynote this morning, enlightening to see. It'll be good. I mean, during the pandemic we saw, there is no real coordination, and when people are working on rare diseases, it'll be really good. With one filing, you get approvals across all major countries. I mean, right now, what you have, case-by-case basis, if you have a rare disease, if you start with the EU, you go to US and vice versa, they reciprocate. They expect you not to do additional trials, they'll give you approval. But why you still have to do the filings? Why can't you have one filing which can take care of all the major countries? That change needs to come. Otherwise, it takes a lot of effort and resources to do that, going by region and filing these things. So that will be really good to get the harmonization across the board, especially when you're targeting about rare diseases. And the large disease burden, I can understand. They need a lot more safety data. So every region has a demographic. They want to make sure you are taking those patients into the clinical trials. They want to see some data. I understand it. But from rare disease perspective, it will be good to really harmonize, have a single application. Yeah. That will be great for the companies. That's one learning. Second thing is testing. Yeah. Some testing, all our gene therapies, it's enormous amount of work we have to do. And ideally, if you have a testing labs in the US and we're testing it, if we can get certified by QPs per batch, that will be really efficient. So we don't want to duplicate and tech transfer, spend another hour, 1 year or 2 years doing that. So a lot of these things can be harmonized.
Okay, thank you. And Kinnari, can you highlight how this dream can, can come through, and then we can see more harmonized approach and probably single filing for different regions?
Because you said the word dream, an idea popped up, so I'll just say that. Something that US does well, that maybe if there was something similar in the EU that could help commercial viability, which is this: the pediatric rare disease voucher program in the US, getting a drug approved, being able to monetize this for biotech sector as a whole fuels the innovation and fuels the R&D, right? So it's great not just to treat patients and eventually get a commercial ramp up, having that initial infusion of cash that could come in if you monetize upon approval is a beautiful thing in the US. Something similar to that, if it could be created in the EU, I think that could help the entire cell and gene therapy sector. So to me, that's one of the ideas. I don't know how we do it. It won't be part of the new legislation going on in the EU right now, but maybe it's something to be aspired to 5 years or whenever down the road, to have some equalization from that perspective. The other component that EU does well is they have a lot of the country level healthcare system costs cover genetic testing and therapies and et cetera, which is great, right? But in the US, when we launched the Mission Genome, and it has a great uptake and ICD-10 codes and et cetera, in the EU, I'm getting calls from cardiologists in Italy, in Florence, saying, hey, actually this cardiomyopathy panel is not covered in Italy, right? It has to be paid by private. Can you do something in the EU, right? Can you do something for Italy, which is slightly different than for something for Spain and Germany? So if there was a way to strengthen the genetic testing abilities across European countries, not just country by country, but across it, that would make things a lot easier for monogenic diseases or rare disease that we work on.
Thank you. Rebecca, the fact that you're working with Carvykti, very large indication, do you see these regional differences impacting the approach you're taking?
I see some regional differences in the sense when I think about our clinical development or evidence plans, the standard of care in the different countries and the different regions can be different. So it's something that we have to look at very strategically and prioritize where we can cover different standards of care. So that is really important and a difference. I agree that anywhere we could harmonize, either from a clinical development or manufacturing standpoint, is also great. Again, we're a global brand. While we have 4 manufacturing sites, we do look to be able to leverage them all globally. So the more we can do in common and make sure everything's up to the same common standard is really great. And I want to take the opportunity to also mention, we have the experience that also we learn regionally between the different regions how physicians are using these therapies. therapies. Many of these therapies are new platforms that come with new ways of administration or new workflows within the hospital or new AEs that need to be mitigated. And we're able to really cross-pollinate between the regions, and it's really, a global community treats multiple myeloma. I assume it's probably the same with rare diseases as well. So the world is quite small. So there's really an opportunity to leverage learnings across different regions to benefit, to kind of accelerate the learnings on a new platform.
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, I want for us to move to the closing remarks. Basically, cell and gene therapies are offering cure. They are life-saving therapies. I would like for each of you, maybe in 1 minute each, if you can highlight what's the future of cell and gene therapies. And if you can just put the angle of patient and patient access, I would really appreciate that. And we can start with you, Shankar, and then next panels.
I think, I personally believe cell and gene therapies are going to be the future. We're just at the tip of the iceberg. However, as we talked about market access and also commercial viability, the models are going to come, next generation of companies are going to show commercially they're viable. However, from patient perspective, I always believe you cannot take a spaceship to Mars. If it doesn't do any good to mankind, it's useless. So if we do these one-time curative therapies, we're talking about US, Europe, Japan. How about patients across the globe? Just because they cannot afford, they should not be robbed. They cannot wait 10 years. Whatever disease you're working on, that will be a challenge for all of us, and we really have to think about providing market access to patients who need them. Not after 10 years we launch in US or EU, a lot sooner than that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Kinnari, please.
I would say this. This field, I feel so lucky and fortunate to be part of a field where, as a pharmacist, I never thought I'd work on therapies that could cure a patient. And their dysfunctional missing gene is replaced, and they could live a normal life, which is not just an impact to the patient, but the caregiver in that entire ecosystem. So I'm optimistic that this technology is just going to become more and more applicable to not just monogenic, but polygenic and other diseases. But the one message I will give to everyone attending and watching online, you guys are amazing at what you do. Initially, 15, 20 years ago, people got over, is it safe? Could we do gene therapy? What's the operational issue? What's the CMC thought, right? So yes, there are challenges. And now the big question is, are you going to have a commercialized success product, right? We'll figure this out because of individuals that are motivated, because the unmet medical need is real, and because this community knows how to have grit and perseverance. So keep doing what you're doing, because I think we're going to succeed.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm just going to build on that for those of us that have been in the industry for quite a while. 10 years ago, the question was, can companies make it work? Now we turn around, we are making it work every single day. So there's multiple examples now of commercial success. There's many products in the pipeline. Not all of them will make it, right? Some for scientific clinical reasons, but some also for strategic decisions and whatnot. So just be smart about it. Look at examples that have made it. Think about how you can prove your value, how you can make sure you're out there with the right evidence to convince physicians around adoption. And hopefully we'll see more and more successes coming to the market.
Thank you. In the end, I don't think we have a lot of time for questions, but the panelists are here. You can connect with them and you can ask questions. But I wanted to highlight that, as you highlighted, the patients are at the core of cell and gene therapies. And we have come a long way, decades of experience, building and expanding of the learnings from other pharma biotech applications and the progress that we've made, cell and gene therapies. The therapies that are becoming commercial and will become more and more commercial, we need to keep going with the focus. Hopefully, considering some of the great points and comments that the panelists shared today, we would love to see more cell and gene therapies, and because this is the only way forward to bring cure to many patients who need them the most. So I wanted to thank you for great panel discussions. There are a lot of other topics that we could not cover, but hopefully in the next couple of days we can cover in other sessions. And I wanted to thank the organizers for these exciting sessions. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you.